welcome back to another reading with Mr. White with me, Mr. White, and this, the Nowhere Emporium. We're on to chapter 26 today. Can you remember what happened in chapter 25? I'll remind you in case you've forgotten. So Daniel, well, lots of things are going wrong in the Emporium, aren't there? Things are falling apart, cracks are appearing in the wall. Daniel is still trying to find Ellie. He's trying to find, obviously, Mr. Silva. He's handed over the Book of Wonders to Vindictus Sharp. Don't think that was a good thing, do you? No. And on his travels, he tries to find Caleb. Climbs up lots and lots of flights of stairs to Caleb's room. When he gets there, Caleb's room isn't there anymore. It's there's just nothing. The nothingness, I think the chapter was called. He almost falls into the nothingness, but Caleb rescues him. Daniel tells him what's been going on. Caleb said that there's lots of people unwell in the Emporium. There's a hospital wing where some of the survivors are. Still no sign of Ellie though. Still no sign of Mr. Silva, and the book is gone. And Caleb now knows that Daniel hasn't got the book anymore. They've gone their separate ways. So Daniel's off on his travels trying to find Vindictus Sharp, I think, to try and get this book back. But also, he desperately wants to know where Ellie is. So we're going to read chapter 26 today, which is called An Unexpected Visitor. And we're going back in time again. It's Edinburgh, June 1897. Lucian Silva's Emporium was the talk of Edinburgh and far beyond. There were days when the shop was so busy that he barely remembered a face, the stream of customers becoming a blur of smiles and compliments. But on the first anniversary of the Emporium's opening, Lucian was introduced to a face he would never forget. He had placed an advertisement in each of the city newspapers announcing that entry to the Emporium would be free. On the day itself, Silva sat at his desk near the red velvet curtain, nodding to passing customers. Many of them commented that it seemed impossible that so many wondrous rooms could exist in a stick-thin little shop. Near the end of the day, someone approached the desk. At first, Lucian did not look up from his book, but then he heard a familiar voice, deep and firm and cold. "Hello, Lucian." Vindictus Sharp had not aged a day since their last encounter in the rainy Edinburgh graveyard. Can you remember why he didn't age? Let me know in the comments below if you can remember why. In his travels before he settled back in Edinburgh, he had discovered layers of magic that were hidden to all but a select few. Magic that could unlock the mysteries of life and time and the universe. He was more certain now than ever that he knew the secret to Vindictus Sharp's long life. Sharp was stealing the future from innocent people, stealing time and adding it to his own life. Lucian stood. He had been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. To be able to rub his success in Sharp's face, to show him how wrong he'd been. He had actually stayed awake at night, imagining exactly what he'd say if they ever crossed paths again. This was his chance. Something shifted behind Sharp. He moved aside, and Lucian's eyes met those of a second person. All thoughts of Sharp were lost. The young woman was perhaps a year or two younger than Lucian. Her skin was fair and freckled, and her hair fell in tumbling red curls over her shoulders. "This is Michelle, my daughter," said Sharp. Michelle held out a porcelain hand, and Lucian kissed it. As his lips touched her skin, the air in the room seemed to shiver and crackle. Lucian pulled at his necktie. "Pleasure to meet you. I don't recall your father ever mentioning a daughter." Sharp sat on the edge of the desk and began examining one of Lucian's fountain pens. "There are a great many things I did not mention. Michelle has been in boarding school most of her life. I travel the world, and this is no way for a young girl to grow up." Lucian nodded. He felt his gaze draw back to Michelle. "Well, what can I do for you?" he asked. "What brings you to Edinburgh?" "Business," said Sharp. "I am booked to perform in Edinburgh for 1 month. Word of your work has reached me from the Magic Committee." At this, he glanced around the shop. "I could not resist stopping by for a peek." Lucian smiled. "Then a peek you shall have. Miss Sharp, would you care for a tour round my emporium?" Michelle Sharp's blue eyes met Lucian Silva's thunder grey ones. She smiled a shy smile. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Silva," she said, And so Lucian led the way, taking great delight in Michelle's amazement, using every opportunity to remind Sharp how the idea for the Emporium was born in the very same notes he had dismissed as nonsense. 2 hours later, when the tour was complete, Lucian watched Sharp and his daughter stride down the narrow street. He was sure of 2 things. Number 1, he had surpassed Sharp in every possible way. More importantly, Sharp was aware of this fact, and it would eat away at his insides like an infestation of maggots. This thought made Lucian very happy. Number 2, Michelle Sharp was nothing like her father. She was enchanting and warm, and Lucian knew that he must, no matter what it took, see her again. His wish was granted the next day. Michelle returned to the Emporium, and this time she was not with her father. I had to see it all again, she confessed. It is remarkable and impossible. I couldn't stop thinking of you or your Emporium when I left. They walked the shop's ever-growing number of corridors, Michelle laughing in delight when rain began to fall in one of the passageways. Lucian produced a black umbrella seemingly from nowhere and held it over her head. The day passed in a haze of shy laughter. As she left, Michelle gave him a lopsided smile. I don't think my father likes you very much. Lucian breathed in her words. The feeling is mutual, he said. You're not scared of him the way that everyone else is, are you? Michelle said. No, being frightened of him is only giving him what he wants. Michelle beamed at him. Then she did something he had not been expecting. She leaned in, pressing her lips gently against his mouth. Ooh, romance! When the kiss was over, Lucian stumbled back a step, ran flustered hands through his tangled hair. What was that for? But she only smiled and turned away through the door to the cool Edinburgh sunshine. Lucian watched her, his face pressed against the glass of the shop window, until she turned the corner and was gone. Ooh. Lucian and Michelle spent every day of the following month together, hidden away from the world. Each night he would create a new wonder to bewitch her. The sound of her laughter was intoxicating, and the touch of her lips a drug to which he soon became addicted. Beat by beat, Michelle Sharp was stealing Lucian Silva's heart. If only he had known what was next on her list. Oh no, it sounds like it's a trap. Oh, I hope not. Oh no, Lucian deserves to be happy, doesn't he? Is Michelle Sharp in on it? Is she part of her dad's master plan to try and get back at Lucian Silva? It says here, beat by beat, Michelle was stealing Lucian's heart. If only he had known what was next on her list. So that means she's going to try and steal something else. What could it be? Oh no! I would say find out next time, but that was only a short chapter, wasn't it? Let me know what you think is going to happen. Shall I read chapter 27? Chapter 27 is called The Truth. I think I should. Let's go. Daniel's worry was turning to cold panic. He had rushed back to the shop front to look for Sharp, but he wasn't there. He prayed that all of this was a misunderstanding, that Sharp simply wanted privacy to study each page in his quest to find Mr Silva. So we're back in present time again now, aren't we? We're back in the Emporium with Daniel trying to find him. But as Daniel paced anxiously around the dusty room, he grew more certain that Ellie had been right, that there was something off about Sharp. He began to move the pieces around in his mind, struggling to fit them together. Sharp had shown up only days after Silva's disappearance. There was a hungry look in his eyes every time he caught sight of the Book of Wonders. Daniel had fallen into a deep sleep after handing him the book and hadn't seen or heard from him ever since. Just like that, the puzzle clicked together. If the wrong person got hold of it, the Book of Wonders could be used to hurt the Emporium just as easily as help it. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Sharp had the book, and everything was crumbling so much faster. Somehow his presence was speeding things up, causing more damage. And there was one room where that damage could be fatal. Daniel ran and ran, his legs and lungs pleading for rest. He needed to know if he was right about Sharp, and he now knew beyond doubt he had to get the Book of Wonders back. Without it, everything Mr Silva had ever created would be lost. But as he made his way deeper into the corridors, his mind clouded and he became confused, losing all sense of direction. His connection with the shop was fading again. Oh, not now, please! A twist and a turn, leaping down a staircase 3 steps at a time, and another, until one of the stairs crumbled beneath him, and he rolled the final few steps and landed with an awkward slap on the floor. Daniel's arm throbbed. He fought back the tears, clenching his fists. A flutter of wings, a flash of silver. Ooh, when we see wings and a flash of silver, and usually he's getting a bit of help from somebody, isn't he? That's what's happened in the past. Something clipped Daniel's shoulder and landed with a graceful hop beside him. The silver magpie twitched its head to one side, observed him for a few seconds. Then it called out again, and almost immediately the second bird appeared, gliding in a circle over Daniel's head and corkscrewing down to land on his shoulder. It pecked at his ear. Do you remember earlier in the book, didn't Silver say that when he needs help, the Emporium will help Daniel? It might help him if ever he needs help. And maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe the Emporium is sending the birds to help him. Who knows? Daniel tried to wave it away. Beat it, I'm not in the mood. The pecking continued. The first bird, the one at Daniel's side, called out again and flew off down a dark corridor. Before he could blink, the bird was back, this time landing on his head and pecking at his skull as if trying to open a tough nut. Daniel let out a laugh. "You can show me the way," he said, scrambling up. "Come on, we need to go to the fountain." The birds were clearly agitated as they flew. Daniel found it difficult to keep up, and every so often they'd swoop down and nip him on the ear or pull at his hair with sharp beaks. They led him to the great hall of staircases, down and down to a crumbling corridor where frost was gathering on black stone. Daniel rubbed his hands together as he breathed winter morning air. A door was ajar, letting a blade of sunlight into the darkness. Daniel knew where he was, knew that he had visited this place before when he was new to the Emporium. He paused at the entrance, reached out and traced the frost-covered golden letters. The Fountain. Can you see that? That's the name of the room. With a push, the door was fully open, and Daniel stood once again on the surface of a frozen pond surrounded by woodland, hot breath rising from his mouth. Everything was as he remembered, the crisp air, the endless stretch of blue sky. And then he saw the broken mountain of stone that lay in the centre of the pond where the fountain should have been. Daniel hurried out across the pond, his feet crunching in the frost. He picked up a piece of what had once been the fountain and tossed it from hand to hand. There was no sign at all of the silvery liquid, the imagination that Mr Silva had described as the lifeblood of the Emporium. Part of the outer bowl remained intact, though there were sharp fragments of rock jutting out here and there, one of them smeared with a thin red liquid. Blood. A sorry sight, don't you think? Vindictor Sharp stood a few metres away on the opposite side of the fountain, his hands behind his back. He had not been there a moment ago. "Where have you come from?" he said. "Didn't I..." Oh, sorry, no, it's Vindictor saying this. "Where have you come from?" he said. "Didn't I ask for time to study the book alone?" "Yeah, well, things have changed," said Daniel. "I think I made a mistake." A pause. He took a long breath. "I'd like the Book of Wonders back, please." Sharp raised a silver eyebrow. "You'd like it back?" "Yes. It wasn't really mine to give away. You can still study it, but I'd like to be there when you do." A thin smile crossed Sharp's lips. "If it was not yours to give away," he said, "then it is certainly not yours to take back." Daniel stared into the cold blue eyes. An alarm bell was ringing in his head, telling him he'd been right, that Sharp was dangerous. He glanced again at the fountain, at the sharp point of stone smeared with blood. "Whose blood's that?" Sharp hesitated, then he brought his hands from behind his back. They were clutching the Book of Wonders, and they were covered in cuts and scrapes. Daniel took a half step back. He wanted to run, but he couldn't. This was his mess, his mistake. Sharp flashed a smile like a knife. "You've caught me red-handed, as it were. To tell the truth, I'm growing tired of this act. I have no intention of returning the book to you, Daniel. In fact, the only reason I allowed you to hold on to it for so long was that I thought you might lead me to Lucian. He's showing his true colours now, isn't he?" Daniel stared at the Book of Wonders in Sharp's big hands. "I don't get it. Wrecking the fountain? You're speeding things up, killing the Emporium. Why? Back when we were walking together, said Sharp, you asked me what Lucian was running from. What could possibly frighten him enough that he spent his whole life looking over his shoulder, always ready to flee to the next town, the next city, the next window in time? Sharp brushed a hand over his neat silver hair, ran his fingers over his moustache. The answer, boy, is that Lucian Silva was running, is still running, from me. Daniel heard the words, but he could not make sense of them. Why? Sharp moistened his lips with his tongue. He lifted up the Book of Wonders. The book? Said Daniel. That's what all this is about? So, if you've got it, why are you still here? Why haven't you just taken it away? It's not quite as simple as that. A magician cannot steal a magical object from another of his kind. The bond between the creation and the creator is too intense. If I walk out of here with the book, it will not work for me as fully as I desire. No, for the Book of Wonders to truly be mine, I must either win it from Lucian or he must pass it to me with his blessing. The latter is never going to happen, so I have no choice but to take the book through more aggressive measures. I've been chasing for many years, boy, and each time I'm come close, each time I can feel the book, smell it, Lucian wriggles away. Not this time. Something is different. He is weak. I found him easily. At this, Sharp spat on the frost. You can see how he has reacted, running away like the weasel he always has been. You hoped I'd lead you to him, Daniel said, so you could, what, kill him? Sharp smiled an affable smile. That's about the size of it, he said. But seeing as you failed in spectacular fashion to locate him, I turned to other means. I knew there must be a weakness somewhere in the Emporium, and that I could find it in the book. He opened his arms. And here we are, the fountain Lucian has been relying on the imagination of his customers to keep the place running. He is weaker than I thought. He no longer has any customers, and now the fountain is no more, the Emporium will crumble much more quickly. Lucian has a choice. He can either stay in this hole like a rodent and die with this place, or he can come out wherever he is and face me. Either way, the Book of Wonders will be mine. He nodded to Daniel. You have talent, a connection with the book that could be very useful. The end of the Emporium need not be the end of your journey. I could help you become great. Help me like you helped Mr Silva, said Daniel. No thanks, I don't fancy a knife in my back. Sharp shrugged his wide shoulders and said, Lucian has nobody to blame but himself. His actions, his cowardice sealed his fate. The choice is yours. Stay here and wait for the Emporium to die, go down with the ship, or learn from the best and open a new world of possibilities. Daniel returned the cold stare, trying with all his might to hide the fear coursing through him. The enormity of his mistake was hitting him hard. He had invited Sharp in. He had handed over the Book of Wonders. Every cell in his body was telling him to turn and run, but Daniel did not run away. He stepped forward. You think I could be great? He said. Sharp leaned his head a little to one side as if sizing him up. I think that together we could discover secrets about the book that even Lucian does not know. Daniel took another step forward, his heart thundering. His eyes flicked to the book, but only for a second. Just a little closer. How can the book have secrets from Mr Silva? Daniel asked. Magic has its mysteries, my boy, even for the best of us. From somewhere behind him, Daniel heard the call of a magpie. Is that how a magpie sounds? Maybe. Sharp looked away for a moment, but it was enough. Daniel snatched the book from his hands and spun away through the frost towards the doorway. Go, Daniel, go! He didn't dare look back as he ran. What next? Where to go? He almost tripped over his own feet. A few more steps, just a few more. A strong hand grabbed at his hair and snapped him backwards with such force that his feet left the frosted ground. When he landed, there was no time to react. Sharp stood over him, sneering. He grabbed him again by the hair and dragged him up. Then a look of mad fury on his face, Sharp reared back and struck Daniel across the mouth. Tsh! The world blurred at the edges. Daniel stumbled to his knees, blood pooling in his mouth. Sharp was stalking towards him like a big cat. He was enjoying himself. Daniel backed away, still on his knees. "You'll never find him," he said, clutching the Book of Wonders to his chest. "Nobody will find him if he doesn't want to be found." Sharp nodded. "Then I'll wait," he said, "until this place falls apart and takes him with it. But I will win." He raised his great hand again. Daniel cringed, waiting for the next blow to arrive. But before he could connect, the magpies swooped down upon Sharp, pecking at his eyes, crying out with chattering screeches. "Ha ha ha, yes!" Daniel knew that the birds were calling to him, "Run away, take the book to safety." But he was dazed, unable to do anything but watch Sharp flail and curse. "Get off me!" Sharp, who had been staggering backwards, grabbed one of the magpies as it arrowed towards his face. It wriggled and called out as it tightened his grip, as he tightened his grip around it and slammed it to the ground with a sickening crack. Then he lifted his foot and brought it down with all his strength and weight, crushing the delicate metal bird beneath the sole of his shining black shoe. "No!" Daniel wanted to run at Sharp, to jump at him and hurt him. Sharp looked up, dragging his gaze from the shimmering carcass of the magpie, and Daniel felt a jolt of ice in his spine. The second magpie continued to attack, buying Daniel moments. He glanced at the book in his hands, turned and began to run. The frost was slippery beneath his feet as he dashed to the door. Before he was through, he heard Sharp call out, "You can't hide forever, Daniel Holmes. Sooner or later I will find you, and when I do, I will take my book. The only way I'll leave without it is in a coffin." Whoa, what a chapter that was. Oh, well, we had 2 chapters, didn't we? I didn't realise that second chapter was going to be so exciting. I can't wait to find out what happens next. I hope you're going to join me. Chapter 28. It's called Reunited. I wonder who's going to be reunited. Let me know in the comments down below. I can't wait to read this. See you later. Bye-bye.